Hey there, guys. All right, today we are watching a video that showed up on my recommended feed. Now, this is, as it says in the title, a film analysis, but also I think we can talk about some aspect here of the title, Humanizing Hitler, what Downfall is really about. Now, we're going to focus here on the humanizing Hitler part, as that is not something we should be to do. You're going to be like, what do you mean? Well, what I mean by that is Hitler is human, and what we have done because we want to, I think subconsciously, right? I don't think this is not something that I think we consciously do. I think it's very much a subconscious thing that we have done over the last 70 years. How many years has it been since World War II and well, really the rise of Hitler? 80 years? His 20s and 30s? Anyways, what we have done is we have tried to, I think, subconsciously distance ourselves from not just Hitler but also the Nazis as a whole, in in rightfully vilifying them, but in a way in which we do not really view them as human. Talk about them pretty much as monsters, and they committed monstrous acts, but they were very much humans that did it. And I think a lot of what can become a problem when we talk about humans that did monstrous acts and talk about them as though they are monsters and not human, whether subconsciously or not, what that ends up doing is it creates distance and creates this sort of this feeling of humans cannot do what Hitler did, right? What Hitler did cannot happen in the United States was a very popular thing to be said when I was studying, um, when I was in middle school and high school. Clearly, I was super fucking wrong. Um, right? And so by dehumanizing, what we've done by dehumanizing Hitler is we have then taken away the responsibility, I guess, of in the notion that humans are very much capable of these things. Now we are trying to course correct, but unfortunately, I think we were a little late in course correction, at least in the United States, in this sort of thing. And I mean, we even see it with a certain political figure of recent times, of the last 10 years, um, who in two of the three elections that they have partaked in, they were the focus of two of those three elections were very much vilifying and vilifying a person, sort of dehumanizing them. The problem with that, right, is it immediately creates a barrier in reaching to the other side and pulling voters away from that person. Um, and also, vilification campaigns never work. It was tried with against Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson won. 2020 happened and was able to be different because the focus of that campaign was not dehumanization of the other side, right? So ultimately, what this video, what I'm arguing here, yapping a lot, is stop dehumanizing bad people. They are humans like us. And we must acknowledge the fact that we humans are very much capable of atrocity. Okay, because what that does is it creates a subconscious problem. I'm yapping a lot. Let's dive into this video here and get this film analysis. I I doubt my rant at this made any sort of like sense, and I doubt it was easy to follow. I don't even think I could follow myself.
There is perhaps no historical figure name checked more than that of Adolf Hitler. The name has in many ways become just a substitute for evil or a default attack on politicians. I mean, if I had a penny for every time Hitler was compared to Trump, I wouldn't be even making this video right now. I'd be snorkeling in Tahiti or something.
Mm-hmm.
And for as controversial as the man still remains, there's almost no disagreement about him. Everyone agrees that the actions of his regime were incredibly evil. You only get in trouble with Hitler when you don't seem to hate him enough, which is treatment other murderous dictators of the 20th century don't receive. The incomparable hatred towards Hitler, hatred he knew he was going to receive, by the way, renders making a movie about him incredibly difficult. If the audience gets a whiff of
I do want to disagree though, at least with the Mao Zedong. Like, at least in America, you kind of have to hate Mao, right? Like, Mao is very much treated somewhat in the same way as Hitler. Now, of course, not to the degree, and that's just because Mao is not in the Western cultural zeitgeist as Hitler, right? Hitler is a Western leader of a Western country. Mao is an Eastern leader of an Eastern country. It's not, right? That's, you know, like, does that make sense? Right? Like a vilification of Mao on the levels of Western vilification of Hitler, of dehumanizing Hitler, makes sense for, like, Korea, Japan, those countries, because those are Eastern countries that are also geographically really close to where Mao Zedong ruled. United States and other Western countries have closer ties to Germany, and thus, because of that, our emphasis here on a very evil person is going to be on the one that is more like our cultural values and beliefs. That is what Hitler represents. Mao Zedong does not have those same cultural beliefs or societal norms, right? Those are more aligned with Japan, Korea's. And whereas America, German, more aligned. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It makes sense up here.
of sympathy from the filmmaker, questions are bound to arise. Fair or not. And if he's turned into a Bond villain who takes delight in making everyone around him feel terrible 24/7, that would be a mischaracterization of who he was. That was only the first challenge Oliver Hirschspiegel had to overcome before diving deeper in his film Downfall, the story of Hitler's last days hidden in a Berlin bunker.
That was a good detail, right? Because again, Hitler does not like smoking. So, oh, that's good film.
Before diving deeper in his film Downfall, the story of Hitler's last days hidden in a Berlin bunker as the Red Army closes in. But Downfall is not so much an attempt to make us see a monster as a flawed human being. Downfall is a warning about how a flawed human being was able to be seen as a god. And it's a story
He's probably going to explain everything that I was saying at the beginning much better than I did.
that should be taken deadly seriously, especially in a time when governments are becoming more centralized by the day. The story begins in November of 1942. 5 women are marched into Hitler's wolf's lair in the middle of the night for the chance to become his secretary. And although the war has started to turn on the Germans by this point, Hitler is still a legendary figure to these women. He is the symbol of power, success, and leadership. Working for him is like winning the lottery. When they first meet Hitler, he isn't scolding a military officer or rambling about some frivolous mistake. He's feeding his dog. And then he greets them in a very subtle and shy way, offering little more than a small smile. This is not the Hitler anybody pictures in their mind, but it's who he was a lot of the time. And if you read Inside the Third Reich by Albert Speer, this side of Hitler is described extensively. His patience with Traudl when she makes a mistake typing his speech is just another moment meant to show us that Hitler was more than just tirades and execution orders. My personal favorite line from the scene is when he tells her that, "I make many mistakes during my dictation, you won't make nearly as many." Self
Again, because he's a master manipulator. He knows what he needs to say as well, right? I think that's another part we should be considering. Hitler was a master at manipulation.
deprecating humor from the most powerful person on earth, that's bound to charm. The movie only gives us this one scene before quickly moving on to the chaos of 1945, but it's potent enough to show why working for this man would be extraordinarily appealing. The rest of the film is a slow motion train wreck, and it's a train wreck for the following reason. Everybody around Hitler locked themselves to him for decades. They fought like children for his attention, they foamed at the mouth for his approval, and they consciously put the fate of Germany in his hands, and he's cracking.
Ooh, the shaking of the left hand. I saw that.
The Nazi leaders give a salute and stand
Oh,
straight when he walks into the room, but behind his back, they're plotting a way out of the disaster he's led them into.
personally, I would have. I'm not a
To the
fan of
room,
the hyperfixation on the shaking hand there in that scene. I think it's a lot stronger in this one, where it's more you see it, but the camera's not focusing on it. I like personally when it comes to films and stuff like that. That's kind of the stuff I like to see. I don't like when the camera hyperfixates on subtle details, unless like it's meant to be a very important detail. I mean, yeah, the shaking is a sign of Hitler's um bodily decline. But I don't know, it's one of those things that I think should have just been left as just a thing in the background to
his
notice,
approval,
like
and they
in this scene.
consciously put the fate of Germany in his hands, and he's cracking. The Nazi leaders give a salute and stand straight when he walks into the room, but behind his back, they're plotting a way out of the disaster he's led them into. And the disaster itself has given quite a bit of screen time alongside the drama going on inside the bunker. The contrast perfectly shows how the incompetence and idiocy inside the bunker affects the civilian population. But the most terrifying part of the combat scenes is not the brutal violence, it's the rationale given by those taking part in it. When a teenage girl is asked why the hell she's still fighting the Red Army when the cause is clearly lost, she says, "We made a pledge to the Fuhrer." It's very important to notice the language when Hitler talks about Germans and when the Germans talk about him. The girl is fighting for an individual, the leader of her country. Hitler, on the other hand, does not recognize her individual qualities. She is just a small slice of the quote unquote German people, and the German people are just one part of his utopian vision. If millions of his people have to die in order for his vision to come to life, so be it. The people are a single organism, and that organism will recover in the same way cities are rebuilt. This is why he tells Speer, if the war is lost, it's immaterial if the people perish as well. The people are a mere part of the National Socialist project. If the project is over, they're just a wheel separated from the car. They have no function. And you can tell that the affection he tries to show towards individuals is completely forced. Even
Okay, so he is talking about what I said earlier about manipulation. Oh, I love this video.
the tear he sheds with Speer, I think it's more out of sadness that the great city he's been dreaming of will never come to be, not really Speer's betrayal. And on a side note, this shot of Speer leaving the building he designed, it's incredible. The
Good scene.
relationship between Hitler and his people creates a two-part question that cuts to the core of the film, and the answers to those questions are connected. The first question is, why does Hitler see his people like this? And why are the people content to accept the role? How on earth could a human being behave like this to someone who sees her as a mere tool? The first question is less complicated than the second. At one point in the film, Trottle stumbles into a room and finds Hitler staring at a painting of Frederick the Great. Hitler had a fascination with conquerors. It's the reason why he made seeing Napoleon's tomb the key stop on his trip to Paris. Hitler would put himself alongside Napoleon and Frederick in the extraordinary men category, which is a label created in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And as the main character argues in the novel, an extraordinary man has a right, an inner right, to decide in his own conscience to overstep certain obstacles in a case when it is essential for the practical fulfillment of his idea. Combine this idea with Hitler's insecurities and acceptance of social Darwinism, and you get a man who can't see past his own interests. And like any true narcissist, he spends the entire movie blaming others for the predicament his nation is in. Even the compliment he gives to the young German getting a medal has selfish intentions.
Peter heißt du. Ich wollte meine Generale in deinen Mut.
He claims in the now famous rant that he conquered Europe all by himself, and if it weren't for sabotage from his generals and the weakness of his people, everything would be fine and dandy. He can't swallow even the possibility that his decisions caused the destruction of his country. The irony is that the reason Hitler had success is the same reason he eventually failed. Hitler, like many people who have gone on to change the course of history, had unshakable self belief. He had complete confidence in his decisions, and changing his mind was extremely difficult. His success early in the war made it even less likely that he would accept the possibility that he made an errant judgment. When things went wrong, that was a consequence of failed execution by his underlings. I think that his self belief was the key to the spell, which is how Speer describes it in his book, that won over the German people. The spell that causes Eva Braun to say, he is the Fuhrer, he knows what's best, and the spell that makes Frau Goebbels feel like life is not worth living without the existence of his regime. This strange ability pops up every once in a while. Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Cleopatra are three examples from antiquity well worth reading more about. Individuals that
I knew Julius Caesar and Alexander. Julius Caesar, definitely. Alexander the Great, though? I mean, I don't know enough about Alexander the Great, rather to really disagree on that. Cleopatra is maybe for, I could see women at the time really being, women of antiquity really following Cleopatra. Men of antiquity, I don't know if.
seem to captivate everybody that enters their circle of influence. The Hitler we see in Downfall is fully convinced of everything he orders and says. When he explains why compassion is a sin during dinner, he explains the idea like it's completely obvious, like you'd have to be an idiot not to agree with him. And when he tells the pilots that come to die with him that he set a trap for the Soviets and a game-changing offensive is imminent, they can't help but be put in a trance. When he tells his generals that they can do what they want since nobody is following his impossible orders, they are not able to fill his shoes. They stand around like confused little children who got left behind at the zoo. And then they eventually decide that, well, the Fuhrer's just confused and he'll recover. So they complain incessantly about him, but once he steps out of the driver's seat, they want him back. There is a brilliant quote from Bertrand Russell that reads, "The whole problem with the world is that the fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, but wiser people so full of doubts." Downfall
Yup.
adds another element to this quote. Those full of doubts are desperate to follow those who are sure of themselves. We see this on full display when a nurse begs Hitler not to give up hope and assures him that, if he leads, they will follow. This is a major problem in human coding, and it's the warning of downfall. Human beings lift up those who have total self-belief and view them as shortcuts to prosperity. We idealize them. We believe that if they can just gain power or hold on to it, our lives are destined to improve, because they tell us as much and believe it with all their hearts. The belief is infectious. But human beings are human beings, and it isn't until Berlin starts to crumble that some people around Hitler begin to see this reality clearly. And I love the way cinematography is used to show the truth of Hitler. The Nazi regime wanted him to be this, the powerful leader who could do no wrong. But in reality, this is Hitler, a pouty narcissist who throws tantrums when his plans fail, and the shot emphasizes how small he really is. And during Hitler's last
Beautiful.
meal, Traudl really looks at him. She sees his shaking hand, his head buried in pasta as his city burns, and the endearment in her eyes when she first met him is completely gone. She sees him for what he is, just another human being, a human being corrupted by resentment and evil ideas. Eva Braun tells Traudl that, "I've known Adolf for 15 years and don't know anything about him." Nobody in Germany really did. He was extremely reclusive, but the truth is they didn't want to know what he truly was. They wanted to believe his promises. They wanted to believe in the idealistic image created in their minds and by propaganda. But at the end of the day, this is how the story ended. His corpse is thrown in a muddy pit, covered in kerosene, and lit on fire. And the only legacy to his name is 50 million dead bodies. Because we now know the extent of Hitler's barbarity, it's easy to dismiss their impulse to idealize him, but it's a constant danger to every human heart. The tendency to lie, slander, and make excuses for those who we believe will take us to the promised land. I've certainly been guilty in the past, and I try to avoid doing it. The downfall didn't begin when Hitler marched into the Soviet Union. It didn't begin when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor or on D-Day. The downfall began when Germany started putting their faith in a single man, when they elevated him to a role he only ever used to pursue his own personal glory. We can't be like Goethe in the film, who pathetically declares, "The Fuhrer has things under control," as Soviet artillery is crashing all around her. We can't throw our hopes and dreams on the shoulders of another human being because they're just that, another human being. flawed in a million different ways. Anyone given the power to lift you up has the power to throw you down. And that's the harsh truth characters inside the Berlin bunker struggle to accept during the events of Downfall. And it will remain one of the most psychologically relevant films that covers the human propensity to believe in those who believe in themselves, no matter who they are underneath. It goes without saying that the performance by Bruno Ganz is staggering, one of the best in film history. And if you want to see a spiritual sequel, if you will, to his performance as Hitler, watch A Hidden Life by Terrence Malick. It's one of the best World War II films ever made, and Ganz plays a fairly brief role, but it's a very interesting one to say the least. If you have any thoughts on the film,
And that was Humanizing Hitler. What Downfall is really about. Film analysis. This was great. This is great. This is exactly like pretty much explained everything the way that I tried to explain, but probably failed. So yeah, this was fantastic. I have nothing else to say here at the end of this video aside from I hope you guys enjoyed as well as I did. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I will see you guys in the next. Peace.